Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar on intent-driven cybersecurity for 5G networks. I'm very honored to have two great panelists with me today. It's going to be a CTO talk. I have Mr. Rajagopalan, CTO, Tata Elxsi, and I have Mr. Rahul Jadhav, CTO, co-founder, AccuKnox. So before we begin, let me introduce the panelists to you. Mr. Rajagopalan has been with Tata Elxsi for 27 years, and he has a reputation of building great products and solutions for customers that drive the correct value. These products have won multiple global awards and across a diverse set of fields, including security, network orchestration, transportation, software defined networks, and connected cars. As examples, he led the building of the world's first HD video conferencing gateway for Logitech, WiMAX and LTE stack and radios, and now, of course, the world's first autonomous platform for telecom operators in NEURON. So, thank you, Rajaji, for joining us today. And to introduce our other panelists, Mr. Rahul Jadhav, he is the co-founder and CTO of AccuKnox. So he and his team they build innovative solutions in security field for telecom and enterprises. He's also strong on open source and he leads the maintenance of CubeArmor, a CNCF project that specializes in building runtime security engine for cloud native workflows. He's also the SIG security chair for Nefio, working on container orchestration. So thank you again, Rajaji and Rahul, for joining us today. So with this introduction, let me set the floor here before we turn to our panels for their expert opinion. The advent of 5G has been quite a revolution for the telecom space, where it has brought in notions of softwareization, containerization, virtualization, cloud nativity. So this gives a network that's programmable, that is software aligned, but on the flip side of things, has a lot of touch points, a larger threat vector that really brings into question how do I approach, cybersecurity in the 5G space, and how intent-driven security, can be a game changer that can give the proactive results and the proactive security that we would want in a network that today, more often than not, is viewed as a part of the nation's infrastructure, right? A core part of the nation's infrastructure. So with this introduction, let me first jump to Rajaji. So Rajaji, what are the fundamental differences that you see? People say 5G is a big evolution, it's a big jump. So what is that fundamental difference that you would say is between a 4G and a 5G network?
Yeah, thanks, Ramesh, for setting the stage. And interestingly, you covered many of the salient points. If you just take a comparative stab at 4G and 5G to start with, it could be from technology, the market, and the focus. We take a technology as a vector. 4G is primarily into an IP network, packet based, and has services like VoLTE and at the max edge communication services. And when it comes to the market focus, primarily it's a retail B2C focus. Whereas if we take 5G as a technology stack itself, it's built on cloud native. So when we say cloud native, and along with the technology option, it also brings in a standalone architecture. So these two elements kind of leapfrogs the 5G to a enterprise play. In the sense the market space is expanded to include beyond B2C retail customer to B2B enterprise. When I say enterprise, it includes industry, it could be healthcare, it could be transportation, manufacturing. So it opens it so wide to the the multiple marketplace for the 5G. That's a significant leap. Then on the technology stack, if you just do a double click on it, beyond cloud nativeness, it also has a disaggregated access architecture. Essentially, we can talk about Open RAN and the building blocks of Open RAN. It goes on. And when it becomes cloud native, it also ushers in the new players into the ecosystem, you can naturally assume hyperscalers being in there. The technology stack is same, so you could see in the 5G space, all the major public cloud provider and private cloud providers are there. Be it AWS from Amazon, they are there. Microsoft Azure has a telco offering in the 5G space. And then we have Google also into the space. So in the multitude of dimensions, the 5G is a big, I would say, a differentiator from what 4G is also. And the same elements itself is bring about the new focus because it has a new market attention, new customers. So the technology focus also is a lot more use case driven, which is not the case in the 4G or a priori technology, the legacy technology, what we can talk about. So surely by technology, the market ecosystem, the market players, the architectures in terms of disaggregation, ORAN, edge space, it's a completely a new paradigm to be looked upon. So that's the my perspective on the 5G as for all of us, right?
Thank you, Raji. So, from a technology perspective, it brings in cloud nativity. It disrupts the ecosystem because you touched upon the new age players coming in, as well as from a marketplace perspective, it gives an opportunity for building in new revenue models, new use cases, and also new customer base that did not exist
Absolutely,
earlier.
absolutely.
Fantastic. So, Raji, when we talk about this kind of a promise and a network, what are the core building blocks with which we can construct a network that can help with this technology and marketplace revolution that you talked about?
Yeah, great follow up, Ramesh. So we can possibly look into the domain wise as well. So when you look into it, so when you start from the cloud native, when you talk about, so if you take the core network side, the mobile core, for building out the mobile core, we need a telco cloud infrastructure. Again, the telco cloud could be on-prem or it could be a public cloud. So it provides the flexibility as well as variety. So both brings in the pros and cons of it, right? So because from the deployment standpoint, the core network could be deployed in on-prem, it could be public cloud. So when it comes to the RAN side, again, the disaggregated RAN pays itself to where does the CU, the control units are going to be deployed, where does the DUs are going to be deployed. So it brings about the edge. So then now the edge is going to be provided by the telco or edge is going to be provided by the hyperscalers again. And the interesting new piece which is emerging or which is still in the adoption is radio intelligence controller, the RIC platform. The RIC platform is a key platform which is bringing in the differentiated value prop at the RAN side in terms of the XApps, in terms of the RApps. So the XApps itself is a new paradigm shift into the mobile network side. The reason being, it brings in the App Store concept to the mobile network, App Store concept to the RAN, which is unprecedented. So the XApps, kind of opens up a lot of innovation possibility. The low-hanging use cases, the XApps which are being discussed as of now is energy efficiency, better radio resource management, network slice enablement, then video acceleration, and so on and so forth. It can further, when we discuss about sustainability goals, it can come in, and then when the headnet comes in, it can play a role. So the it opens up a huge innovation possibility, and that's where it also opens up a new players innovation ecosystem. It could be a startup, could be an academia, and also the wide opens the data which could come from the RAN side. The, the sheer definition of open RAN also has the possibility of the telemetry data which were closed until now with the RAN providers from the OEMs or the network equipment manufacturers are going to be opened up based on the interfaces, right? So This how the architecture lends itself to many players, lends itself to innovation ecosystem, lends itself to a new business model itself.
Thank you, Raji. The interesting thing I heard from you is, we are seeing a lot of changes, right? We are seeing a shift in the architecture where we're looking at disaggregated radios, new elements like the edge coming in, and
Yeah.
then even new deployment models like private, hybrid, multi-cloud. So Rahul, they say right, no such thing as free lunch. So with all these new elements coming in, so what is your take on how does this redefine the world of security as we go towards this 5G networks?
First of all, pleasure to be here. In terms of, Rajaji mentioned about disaggregation. So essentially what we are trying to do here is we are pushing in some of the control plane elements to further outside the regular zones, right? Like it's not going to be coupled with the radio layers itself, which means they're going to be pushed in the private data centers, or in some cases even in the public cloud space. All this is great. This is going to enable immense flexibility in terms of deployments. You're going to make use of Kubernetes based deployments, containerized deployments. It's going to provide immense deployment flexibility. But all of this, like you mentioned, it doesn't come at without any cost. The primary cost is security. Actually, there are two types of costs that are involved, I would say. One is performance, but in terms of performance, there are always SLAs that are strictly adhered to. But when it comes to security, right, like say security is something which is subjective. uh, in the context of 5G networks, we are serving mission critical applications, and it is imperative to build something which is secure by design. So moving into such kind of paradigm change, I think it is imperative that we have a security notion that is fundamentally built into the architecture itself. And in that sense, there are several steps taken by several standardization units. But disaggregation, democratization, we talked about multiple vendors pushing in their workloads. In fact, Rajaji mentioned about having an app store like model, like how cool it is, how innovative it could be, where you can actually take decisions. The application developer can consume this rich telemetry and make decisions on the run. This could enable all sorts of possibilities. One has to keep in mind what kind of security risks there are. So, I mean, I could quote a bunch of security risk in the context of Open RAN, in the context of SMO, but disaggregation, democratization, multi-vendor deployments, ephemeral and dynamic workloads, all of these are possibilities. But there are also a lot of possibilities in terms of like when it comes to security issues. So we have to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Rahul. So, the multi vendor nature of these new age networks, the disaggregation, the democratization opens up, new challenges where we need to have an architecture where security is a first class citizen, right?
Right.
Security by design, like you
Yeah.
talked about. So, Raji, coming back to you, so there are trade offs in this new age architectures, with Rahul talking about security being a very key aspect. So, what kind of potential solutions we can look at, or rather, what kind of approach do you suggest so that we can do security by design in this kind of a software centric network?
Okay, so at the high level, philosophically, if you look into it, um, this is a policy issue we are talking about. And then security is, in some sense, is a policy. And while the the disaggregation of the system and then cloud native system and then software centricity and the ability to push in the new features from multiple vendors in agile form, in a CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development form, brings about huge amount of flexibility. But they are also, each one of them potentially brings about and exposes threat surfaces. Each of the open interface itself is a potential threat. Okay. So the traditional way of addressing this is model just using a threat model, do a security posture analysis, do a what if analysis, come up with policies, access control, firewalling, application firewalling, and then secure software update, secure transport, role-based access control. There are layers of security guardrails one can bring in. But the problems with the traditional way of looking into this, the layers of security guardrails I'm talking about, and then the policies, and then the rings of security we can talk about, the zones of security we can talk about. They're all getting a lot more complex and convoluted because of the agility which is coming in, the different touch points, the configuration touch points, what we have, which we kind of touched upon. The same flexibility also brings about the problems. So many number of vulnerable points, vulnerable surfaces are getting exposed. So these kind of multiple moving points typically needs to be kind of orchestrated. So that's where the orchestration comes in as a concept. So it's no wonder the first principle people had termed the term from a symphony. In the sense, disparate systems, disparate entities are all being managed and conducted in a cogent for kind of preparing a harmony, for creating a harmonic sounds, right? So that's what symphony is all about. So the policy itself needs to be orchestrated like this. There could be various touch points, right from the RAN, a disaggregated RAN, the telco cloud, the multiple cloud native mobile core functions, packet core functions, service delivery platforms, but they all need to be orchestrated through the policy, through intents. The security intent needs to be specified as an intent, and that needs to be further decomposed, distributed, and then being pushed across. And the security policies also should have an ability to discover the new vulnerabilities, because we talked about how things are very agile. The features are getting updated on demand. The new capabilities are brought in the app store model. The new bug fixes are getting rolled in by multi-vendor ecosystem. So there has to be a continuous monitoring, continuous discovery process, and then intent-based configuration across the system. An intent-based system, orchestrated intent-based system, could be the only holistic solution what we can think. Other things will induce drifts. One can even do a sit and design the uniform, homogenized policies, hand code, hard code, etc. But they are going to drift across time. Who will monitor the drifts? How the drifts can be reconciled? It's going to be a huge, non-trivial, complex problems. So that's where, yeah, intent-based provisioning, intent-based orchestrating, and then, yeah, monitoring to make sure that the intents are not being drifted. So that's a kind of the framework. Any point of time, I would possibly foresee an advocate for this kind of a problem.
Thank you, Raji. So I guess um, the agile nature of today's software development, the open source driving a lot of the software, the kind of software composition that are now are so diverse in nature, and that can bring about a lot of possible threat vectors that you talked about. And interesting how the traditional way of doing security uh, will have tremendous changes given the programmability of the networks. Right, the networks are so dynamic; they can change a lot. So you're suggesting an intent-based approach, which can help with the security drift, as well as something that can be discovered and dynamically adapted to the changes of the network, unlike traditional systems that we had before. So Rahul, moving on to you. So when we talk about these intent-driven systems, security systems that Rajaji is recommending, can you explain, give more details on that, and as well as why is this so hot a topic right now when you compare it to the previous generation of networks? So why is it more prominent in the 5G?
Okay. First of all, I think we need to understand the kind of risks that we face, right? Like we have been talking about the approach, the intent-driven security approach. Let me just quote you certain risks that we face in the context of 5G deployments. Uh, Imagine an ORAN getting compromised, where you can actually have a malicious XApp An XApp is an entity which can actually control the end user equipments, which means that, let's say, for example, an ORAN, someone injects a malicious XApp in the target environment, that malicious XApp can actually control a user equipment at the end layer, or a group of user equipments. They can control the radio bearer channels, they can control the DRX, the discontinuous reception for a particular user equipment, they can control modulation schemes. There's a lot of there's a lot of possibility there. Similarly, when it comes to SMO layer, we have been talking about use of advanced machine learning algorithms to control the target network, the RAN network, using R1 interface. Imagine an untrusted model getting deployed in SMO as part of non-alter reg, and that untrusted model taking control of the system, like essentially driving the RAN ecosystem. These are immense challenges. One cannot deal with such kind of threats with a traditional approach. And what are the traditional approaches? The traditional approach is essentially an appliance-based solution, where basically you take into consideration flooding attacks. Just having TLS, it's important. Just having mutual TLS authentication and authorization schemes is not enough. Yes, it is important. It's a precursor, but let's assume that's a given. But let's assume that is a given, and after that, think of kind of the risk that we might face. A malicious XApp can actually authenticate itself to a system and then start controlling the user equipment. You need to have security at a multiple layers. And when you talk about multiple layers, there's containerization layer, there's network layer, there could be storage layer, there is Kubernetes layer. We have been talking about, almost everyone is talking about deploying this next gen networks as part of Kubernetes orchestration system. There are multiple layers, and you cannot basically target a particular layer and say, we are secure. And once you have this multi-layer design in place, you cannot simply define, let's say, for example, policies at a particular layer and rest at ease. So you need security at multiple layers. You need a defense in depth approach. And all of this has to be automated. I think that's where Rajesh was pointing about having an intent-driven security solution. Not only just the network automation. Network automation has been a primary target for intent-driven automation. But even from the security perspective, you have risks in terms of container risks, supply chain risks. Rajesh talked about new vulnerabilities getting detected. What if, dynamically, is it possible for a system to identify that there are workloads with a particular vulnerabilities in it and then put in security controls in place? That's basically what we're targeting with intent-driven security. That's primarily the aim with intent-driven security, where as a user or as an administrator, you specify an intent at a high level. It could be, do not allow privilege escalation at a particular layer, or do not allow DNS manipulation attacks, or do not allow, it could be a bunch of things. Under the hood, the system should take care of identifying what kind of right policy sets, rule sets needs to be in place to actually apply these kind of controls. And once you have that system in place, each of this layer will operate independently, and they will provide security at its own layer. And that's how you get defense in depth, right? So that's primarily the rationale behind intent-driven security, where as a user, at the end of the day, you say, this is my security blueprint. Here I go. I apply it. Under the hood, the system sees, oh, this is how the workloads are behaving. These are the workloads who have public access, possibly an external access. These are the workload that needs a higher grade security. These are the workloads who might benefit from hardware-based security. These are the workloads that might need to be moved towards hardware-based security. All of this is specified as an intent, and under the hood, a solution takes care of fulfilling these intents and then reporting back to the user saying that, oh, these are the security intents which are fulfilled. These are the security intents which are not fulfilled. This is where your risk lies.
Thanks, Rahul. And I guess given the different layers and depth of security that you touched upon, right, across infrastructure, server,
Yeah.
storage, clusters, it all the more is important. We want it to be intent-based because we don't want the end users to worry about very complex security syntax and semantics, right?
Yeah.
The intent makes it easier for them to manage the system and I guess move towards a zero trust architecture. Right?
Absolutely.
Where even your zero-day vulnerabilities can be controlled easily. So
Ramesh,
now
if
I
I
have
can If
Yes,
I
yes,
can comment,
please, Raj.
one important point what Rahul had brought about in the machine learning models, which runs as RApps and the SMO.
Hmm.
So that's a very, very critical part. In sense, when we talk about the traditional surfaces, threat surfaces, and threat vectors, etc. The data itself could be poisoned, and the data itself can mislead and then cause a lot of havoc in the RAN side. And as you all understand, the RAN is the most expensive part of it. It is managing the billions of dollars of spectrum the telcos had invested on. So, how the data could be a culprit itself, the data poisoning itself can have catastrophic impact on the machine learning models which are running on the SMO. So that's a great point Rahul had bring about, and thanks for bringing this out. And it made me to comment this, Ramesh.
And we can have a world with rogue agents, right? Rogue agents are running on the network. Thanks, Raji. So, Rahul, as a quick follow-up to that, I know that AccuKnox is deeply entrenched in the open source world.
Yeah.
So, what is AccuKnox doing to advance this field of intent-based security?
Yeah, I think the one of the primary things is that we are always going to have multiple policy engines securing different layers, different runtimes, so to speak. And one of the things that AccuKnox is doing along with Tata Elxsi here, and it's part of an SURAN project, Security Enhanced RAN, but it spans not only for RAN but 5G core as well as SMO. The intention is that we simplify security policy identification and rule sets identification dynamically, wherein given a policy engine, the system dynamically figure out what kind of policies would be required to handle, fulfill a particular intent. We are basically working upon a framework or an architecture called as Nimbus. What it allows you to do is, as a user, you can specify an intent at a very high level. There is a Kubernetes operator under the hood which actually understands this intents, and all of this is based on native Kubernetes resource based models, where there is a intent which is a high level abstraction of a security intent. The Kubernetes security operator basically checks that intent and sees, oh, this is a policy engine that is in place. It can fulfill a particular defense defense rule using a particular policy or a rule, so it automatically applies it, and it does it at multiple layers. Like, let me give an example here. Let's say, for example, there's a DNS manipulation attack that the users are concerned, and user specifies the intent saying that secure themselves, secure the deployment from DNS manipulation attack. DNS manipulation attack can actually be secured at multiple layers. It could be at the systems layer, where the workload, where your DNS configuration files itself could be secured, or at the network layer, where you can say do not allow mapping of DNS traffic to other agents. All of these controls can be built at multiple layer. The intention here is that the intent-driven security automation framework, the term that I used was Nimbus. It's an open source project. It allows you to basically specify this high-level intent and converts the policies that are required to fulfill that intent at multiple layers, thus providing you a defense in depth approach, fundamentally a defense in depth approach.
Thank you, Rahul. Very interesting. So, with a singular intent, we should be able to manage the security in depth challenge.
Indeed.
So, Raji, now to circle back to something that you had kind of touched upon earlier, right? You talked about orchestration and security being a policy. But at the end of the day, orchestration and security is for the deployed 5G network, right? So, what is the role of orchestration in the larger scheme of things in terms of lifecycle management of the 5G, including the services, the security, and policy? What kind of infrastructure do you envision there?
So the orchestration, in some sense, is not going to be a software product. It's in a platform in itself. Considering the multi-vendor ecosystem, multi-domain network, disaggregated access coming in, and multiple policy enforcement point, multiple configuration touch points, etc. So first of all, in Tata Elxsi, when we started the journey of NEURON as an orchestrator, we started as an telco cloud orchestration product, but in the due course, in the past few years, we kind of translated and recasted as a platform which can onboard VNFs, CNFs in multiple contexts. It's just in the could be a telco cloud, mobile core, packet core, orchestration purposes, and automation purposes. And it could be on the RAN side. This is purely from VNF, CNF automation purposes. This is only one aspect of it. As we started having a conversation and then looking at the industry and what is the industry problem and so on and so forth, there had been hidden problems about the network safety and security. When we talk about network safety and security, we talked about the agility of the software releases from multi-vendor ecosystem. Could be the VNF and CNF, could be coming from the network function per se, could be coming from IT BSS systems, from the could be PCRF, could be billing system, could be the new age BSS systems and so on and so forth, right? So it had inherently a multi-factory CI/CD pipeline and environment management inbuilt as part of the platform what I was talking about. The environment management handles multiple potential test environment like pre-staging, staging, and then the pre-prod and prod. So this is where the network safety, in the sense before the whole software blob, because now the network itself can be considered as a software blob, right? So because so many things, except for the things which needs to be operating at the line speed, and then let's say at the symbol speed in the RAN side when we are talking about, etc. Most of them are softwareized. Okay, so software blob is what we are constructing out here. So before it gets into the network, it needs to go through a rigorous verification cycle. The telcos, they're not compromised on their finance, right? So still the finance is a requirement. Still, the cybersecurity is the biggest risk, right? That's how, in the overall scheme of things, as well in the platform play of doing an orchestrator, automating and orchestrating the network functions and IT workload, and also potentially bring about the very important piece of security policy orchestration. That's how we strategically partnered and in this platform. So this NEURON platform infuses the security policy, intent orchestration with this. So overall, the NEURON as an intent-based orchestration platform, and the platform play is the significant, the platform play for solving this bigger problems of disaggregated, open, and then cloud native network, which could be deployed in very many contexts.
Thank you, Raji. But as a quick follow-up, when you talk about NEURON as a platform, right? So you covered multiple areas about managing the workflows across environment promotion, service lifecycle management, security. But if I take an operator, every operator's environment is different, their journey is different. So how would an operator utilize NEURON to solve their problem?
It's a great question. It's also a discovery journey we had also gone through. When we initially started, we started with the umbrella orchestrator and then a single orchestrator orchestrating the entire end-to-end network. In theory, this is possible, and you all will agree, right? So you are part of that journey as well. So you are a co-conspirator in some sense, right? So, but when it comes to the real world problems, so there are domain orchestrators coming from the vendors, and what I mean by domain orchestrators, for the RAN domain, there is an SMO coming from the product vendor himself, and then there are the configuration system coming as a EMS and NMS from, let's say, the mobile core and packet core vendors. But still, when the network as a new paradigm, which we succinctly discussed, but not in a very big way, is network as a service. The network slice as a construct, which is made possible by the cloud native architecture and the 5G. If they need to operate in the network as a slice model, for creating very many use cases on demand, MVNOs on demand, even subscriber fulfillment, etc., etc. So this still needs a single pane of glass, a single policy enforcement point. So this is where we see a mix and match or a Lego block approach taken in the neuron, in the sense where there is the vendor specific vertical orchestrators are available. We could still bring in the neuron and then do a southbound plugin to talk to them and then enforce the policy. If there are already mobile core orchestrators for the infrastructure provisioning, cybersecurity provisioning, policy enforcement, and then run slice creation. So this is where it has a Lego block approach, and based on the current deployment and current assets they have, without, I would say, do a recast of the network, in incurring additional expenditure, we built on top of this. So that's approach, the very pragmatic approach we carried out on the neuron as a Lego block approach.
Thank you, Raji. So this gives operators the flexibility to map their journey, to choose the components required so that their problems are solved and the right value is delivered as part of the program. Very
Absolutely,
interesting.
absolutely.
So moving on, so Rahul Rajaji talked about orchestrating and constructing this end-to-end network across
Right.
multi-domain from core IMS and NEURON.
Mhm.
Can you talk about some specific use cases with particular to this 5G network, right? Where in any of these domains on how intent-based security can be applied.
Let's take the example of that Rajaji mentioned about network slicing, right? Like, network slicing opens up a whole lot of possibilities. You can actually do an optimal utilization of shared resources.
Yeah.
But essentially what is operating on the principle of hard isolation, right? Like essentially what you require is, it should not, a given slice should not interfere, or a given entities on a given slice should not interfere with entities on other slices or other slice modules in general. How do you take into consideration, how do you provide security for all of these things? If you look at from the end-to-end perspective of network slicing, you have Rajaji talked about RAN slicing. You have the network functions. There are a lot of network functions that are involved in the slicing elements. All of these network functions might not necessarily participate in a given slice, but the way in which most of the traditional architectures work is that you have network function as a class of elements. So given the nature of deployments, if you can create an isolation even within the network functions itself, so that only the network functions which are responsible for a given slice are actually operating on that particular slice. So that's one specific example, and this has been highlighted as part of CISO recommendations as well. To achieve this, you need to have multi-layer security again in place, because it's not a single touch point here. You have, when you talk about slicing, you have resource quota creation, you have network bandwidth creation, and to achieve this isolation, you need to have policies at multiple layers. And through a security automation engine, such as you need to have something like an automated system which can control these kind of dynamic, ephemeral, constructs at a scale. It's not a given. You are not operating at a single site. You will have thousands of edge sites. You have to create slices across all of these edge slides, or to the backhaul, to the core, to the final data plane. So how do you do that effectively is basically the problem statement here. And without an intent-driven security automation, it becomes a nightmare. Anyone who has been into security domain knows how difficult it is to manage the policies or rules given the dynamic nature of the deployments that we are having. If you are trying to do this manually, you have already given up, is what I would believe. You do not care about security. If you do not have an automation strategy in place, you do not have a solution in place. That's how I believe. That's what I believe.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Rahul. I think intent is given the lot of moving parts and cloud native, multiple deployments, private cloud. I think it's going to be more of a necessity than a luxury, I guess, from my takeaway from what you said. So Raji, so we have how do we put these blocks together, right? Like so, you talked about intent from an orchestration perspective of services and infrastructure. Rahul talked about intent from security. So when we talk about an overarching notion of intent based orchestration, right? How do we combine all these touch points together to build an efficient network?
So there could be, as we discussed, due to the practical reasons and pragmatic reasons, there could be multiple domains involved and multiple domain orchestrators. However, when it comes to a policies and then the intents, it all should emanate from a single point, and that makes the the configuration to be homogeneous. The configuration drifts can be avoided, and that's what really will bring about the programmability and then benefits of it. So that's where, and that's also is a place where the monitoring for the configuration drifts and then for the policy drifts could be uh, kind of managed. So just if we can take the network slice as a construct, then we are not talking about single 5G network. The through the network slice as a construct, you can form multitude of virtual 5G network on the same physical network. Then you look at the scale of the problem we are talking about. So you can create MVNOs, multiple MVNOs can be created, multiple use cases can be created. Each one of them is going to have a different kind of policies, different kind of quality of services and quality of experience requirement, different kind of security policies, what Rahul is talking about. With the disparate building blocks itself, the complexity is so high, but you just stack it up with network slice as a construct, and then you can apply model and then dynamic slices and then varying security policies and varying policies. The problem is of a very, very complex and non-trivial problem. That's where the intent as a construct and centralized orchestration or overlay orchestration, umbrella orchestration still is a need. You can call it as umbrella orchestrator, you can call it as overlay orchestrator, but it is again is a perspective, right? So there could be other ways. Still, people will talk about federations and so on and so forth, but still there has to be a cogent, homogeneous view of what's happening in the underlying network. So that means you need to have overlay. You need to have a umbrella policy orchestrator, be it network policy, be it security policy, be it the MVNOs, network slice, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Rajesh. So an umbrella policy that can, encompass your infrastructure, network, service, and domains that helps you to, I guess, convert your business intent into a reality, right? Especially given the complexity of the slices and where we want to drive the networks using business intent, right? I want a slice for,
Absolutely.
in-stadium experience or a slice for rural education. The complexity is humongous without proper intent management. Right. So,
Absolutely.
as we go along, so I mean, just to kind of take one step ahead from where we are, if we go from 5G to 6G, right? So, how do you see this paradigms change? Any new challenges that you see in the frontier? I mean, the evolution is. I mean, we are sitting here and talking about 5G. Probably we'll regroup next year for a 6G seminar. So, might as well ask you the question now.
Absolutely. So, from an architectural perspective, there's a huge shift, is what I would say, from 5G to 6G again. From a cloud native 5G, it again leapfrog to AI native. And from the functional paradigm, it goes to a data centric paradigm. So this is the biggest shift I would see. The 6G platform itself is going to be, if you look at the the architectural goals and then architectural blueprints laid out by ITU and then the various forums who are working on the next generation and standardized SDOs, Standard Development Organization, etc. So it's a open system, and AI is infused into almost all the layers. Now, if we take the data and AI's role in 5G, for example, it had gone up to the level of RAN in terms of RIG platforms, and X apps in some sense are leveraging the intelligent telemetry which is coming from the RAN, and then RAPs is pretty much ML models, as Rahul also touched upon, right? So the 6G further pushes down into the physical layer, into the, could be in the algorithms of channel estimations, channel equalization, channel coding. It goes on to the interference management, radio resource allocation, the MAC layer. So there are multiple areas in which the AI is going to come in. It's going to be a lot more software centric and a lot more data driven paradigm. So that's, and if you connect to the security back, so the flexibility and the data driven and openness and open platforms is going to bring about the furthermore interesting challenges for all of us to look forward to and solve.
Thank you, Rajesh. So fundamental shift is going to be from cloud native to AI native, and the associated challenges, the data, the continuous learning, and the security paradigms that may come along with it. So, Rahul, any thoughts from
Just
your
one
side?
more point, Ramesh, if I can add to it. So from the 4G to 5G, the one possible, in my own world's view, the late realization is the use case discovery. Okay, so the industry is still trying to look forward to what is the one single or two or three major use cases, right? Everybody, when we talk to them, starts asking about what is that use case which can be used, which can leverage the network as a service, which can leverage the URLLC paradigm, the edge paradigm, edge use case, etc. So it's kind of an afterthought, in the sense that technology is built first, and then the use cases are being brought in, and then we are talking about industry vertical applications, onboarding the industry people, innovation ecosystem, ISPs, and so on and so forth. In contrary to this, in the 6G, we can see even standard development organization, SDOs, like be it ITUT or be it our one TSDSI in our home turf, they start with 6G use cases. So the focus here is use case, customer segment, and then technology follows, right? So we are all talking about from the design thinking perspective, customer first, customer problems, customer empathy. So this is coming in the standardization also, which is a great thing to look forward to. Possibly what we would be seeing as 6G use cases might come in 5G and vice versa and so on and so forth. But this is a fundamental shift in the way the technology evolution itself is being looked upon, even for the standard organization. So all the technologists also, is compelled to look upon, hey, where is it going to be used? Where this particular feature is going to be used, right? So all this bandwidth we are talking about, where it's going to use, how the edge is going to be leveraged. So that's a great shift while we are talking about data-driven, data-centric, AI infusion towards what? That's also is getting, simultaneously be thought about as another perspective, even from the standard development organization. I think that's another major thing I'm seeing it as overall learning from the industry and standard development organization, and all of us over here as a technologists, right? So we're discussing.
A very interesting point, Raji. How use cases are going to drive the network build rollout and to secure them for the different operations. So, Rahul, any thoughts
I'll
from
keep it
you?
short. I'll keep it short. I think what we are building is we are setting the stage for 6G and future Gs in general, right? Like, once you have an automation, you need to have an abstraction, a higher level or abstraction layer where you can further automate at across multiple layers, at across different sites altogether. I think this is what 6G can build towards. 5G and the associated frameworks. You have an orchestration layer. You talked about, you have intent driven approach taken at almost every layer. The commonality here is there is an orchestration layer which is essentially going to be Kubernetes based, which basically combines all of this together. In future Gs, essentially what we're going to see is an AI ML playing a bigger role, as we all we are very much aware of. That's going to for sure happen, and going to enable applications that might not have been envisioned by the service provider in the first place, uh, completely defined by end application developers, and changing the landscape altogether. So yeah, we are essentially, what we are doing here is setting the stage for 6G, is what I believe.
Thanks, Rahul. So that kind of concludes, I think, the what we wanted to cover today. So fascinating session. So any concluding remarks from Raji? Will go with you.
Thanks, Ramesh. I think the intent-based paradigm is going to stay and then continue to evolve, as even Rahul stated, right? So, and with Gen AI coming in, it's only going to add fuel to it. So the intents are going to be generated by uh, Gen AI agents from multiple perspectives. Could be from marketing, could be from sales, it could be from customer insights, customer discovery, from the operation standpoint, right? So this the paradigm, the intent-based paradigm and orchestration paradigm and platform is going to stay, and that's going to be the going to have a platform abstraction over the future G networks also. So what the 5G had kickstarted as an abstract notion of the 5G itself is a platform, and it can create it can be seen as a service delivery platform as you started off, and then as a shareable assets and elements, etc. So it's going to continue to stay and then evolve and then bring in new possibilities to all the stakeholders. That's the way I see it.
Thank you, Raji. Rahul.
Uh, I personally believe that we are still in the early stages of development, like in the sense of what kind of applications are currently being targeted. Voice, video, data. These were the these were the kind of applications that were targeted by 4G. But with 5G, we are seeing different types of applications that will be targeted. And the more and more applications are targeted, the more and more use cases that the community and the application developers bring in, it would be imperative for the telco providers, service providers to think in terms of how in this world are they going to manage this infrastructure, how are they going to scale, how are they going to uh, take into consideration this requirement. If they cannot, then essentially the developers will go away, they will look for alternatives, and then if they cannot basically handle such kind of requirements, there will be a challenge. So I think 5G has set the stage, but from the adoption perspective, what we have seen is essentially frontal disaggregation has been adopted to the major part. Eventually we see that CU-DU disaggregation would happen. We'll see SMO playing a bigger role, like we've been discussing about RAPs and XAPs playing a bigger role and changing the whole ecosystem. And towards this, all this dynamicity, you have to take into consideration both the performance and security aspects, and without that you won't have a solution in place, you won't have a strategy in place. That's my fundamental belief.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. So before I move on to Q&A, thank you again, Raji and Rahul. It was a fantastic session where we looked into the building blocks of today's telecom networks, today and tomorrow, from 5G to 6G, and what it takes to build these networks, an intent-driven approach, and how to secure and roll out these networks. Right? So with this, let me go to the Q&A. So it looks like we had a good session. I see more than a dozen questions. So apologies to the audience. We only have time for probably 2 to 3 questions. The rest we will answer over email. So let me just pick it up from the chronological order. So first question is, what is the impact of security in enterprise 5G? So I'll give this to Rajaj.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So in the enterprise world, the demands on security is, I would say, the order of magnitude higher. The reason is data privacy and the data confidentiality, proprietary processes proprietary business processes. These are even a competitive advantage for an enterprise. There could be absolutely no compromise on any one of this. Be it data, enterprise processes, enterprise business processes. It's going to, completely make them even out of business if I can, kind of look at the other extreme, right? So because I'm just trying to compare with retail customers. Of course, there are problems, but here the order of magnitude difference is huge. So in the private networks, the the concern is a lot more higher in terms of security because of the reasons what I just now kind of outlined, Ramesh. It's a great question.
Thank you. So next question, I guess this would be for you, Rahul. What is the role of AI in security?
I think yeah, I see one comment in the context as well. So basically, a combination of quantum computing and AI could play wreak havoc in this kind of mission critical applications. And I see, that's a great question, by the way. And then a multi-vendor ecosystem. What I would say is, every security incident is trivial in nature in hindsight. Once it has happened, oh my goodness, this is a simple configuration change which could have prevented this. The question, the primary challenge that all of us in the security domain that we are facing is not with regards to the kind of policy engines that exist out there. There always exists a glue or a solution or a rule which could have possibly prevented a log4j in the enterprise world, or a SolarWinds attack in the enterprise world, or any other zero day. But the fact remains that that particular configuration was never in place. The fact remains that that particular control was never in place. What we are saying is, if you actually depend on someone to actually manually do some controls, putting in controls in place, you're basically inviting for trouble. It is always going to be a challenge where if you try to hand code some of these things, you are going to get it wrong, just like any other thing. So that's a great comment that someone has put in. Quantum computers are going to be a reality. AI is going to be a big reality. The combination of this is going to be a big revolution for all of us. But on the security side, it's going to wreak havoc. But there will always be security engines which can target some of these attacks in place. There will be security engines which will say, if there is a quantum computing play in the system, this is how you can secure things. The question is, at the end of the day, are you in a position to position the right control at the right place, or the right configuration at the right place? And that is essentially a platform play where you need to have a strategy where you say, I'm not going to hand code all of these things. This is my strategy towards securing the system fundamentally.
So having a proper strategy, notion, and platform in space is critical to be able to handle the evolution of computing and the different new threat vectors that may come in.
Right.
So I guess we have time for just one last question. So what is the role of Gen AI in intent management? Rajaji, I'll give that to you.
Okay, thanks, Ramesh. I think we kind of touched upon the intent itself. If we can look at it, I would say semantically, it is more of a declarative language coming from the business users. The business users could be here, yeah, a telco operator, the sense operations team, technology team, could be a business team, could be a marketing team, right? So each one of them having their own perspective. So for the large language model, for the Gen AI engine, the whole network's open data itself could be a fundamental source or the base on which the LLM can operate on. And then you can start imagining how it could be used for, if for the capacity expansion of the network, how the prompt can suggest what could be the recommended actions. For the business users, it can even talk about return of investment and return of value. For for if I'm going to expand this network, what would be the return of value I'm going to get? Okay, for the business user, it could be for the new product introduction, new service introduction. for the marketing team, it can again can give about information about the capacity which is there in the network, the again on what kind of customer segment, what kind of quality of experience that is expected. So it has for each of the stakeholders its own buy-in. So the in some sense the GenAI agent can be a layer above the intent to drive the intent, discover the new intents, recommend the new intents to the corresponding stakeholders. The stakeholder can ask what could be the interesting intent. They can even discover from the the vast amount of data which is getting flowed into the from the network, and then feeding into the LLM. It can be used for further driving the intent driven network from
Thank you,
multiple
Rajaji.
intents.
Thanks a lot, Rajaji. Again, a big round of thanks to Rajaji and Rahul. Thank you for the fantastic panel discussion today. Thank you for our audience for joining us. We are at the end of an hour. Please do reach out to us if you would like to discuss and collaborate more on this tab. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Ramesh, for the wonderful prompting and for moderating this in a great form. And thanks, Rahul. And it was a great session.
Pleasure
I
being here.
enjoyed it.
Pleasure being here. Thank
Thanks,
you very much.
thanks, audience, and have a great time. We look forward.